Good morning again. It is day 4 of Business Mastery here in West Palm Beach with Tony Robbins. And I am going live to talk about day 3. So, first of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Verena and I'm empowering women in tech to get out of the corporate cage and build their own self-made wonderland. Yeah, yesterday was day 3, and like I shared on my stories on IG, it was all about tax and accounting. So you might think that those are topics that are boring, and maybe they are if you teach them in a very dry way. But yesterday was actually still fun. So there was a guy whose name was Keith J. Cunningham, if I remember correctly, and he taught tax and accounting in a really fun way. And also, I mean, he's a super successful investor, business guy who talked about how to look at a balance statement and what to look out for when you're evaluating a company. So we looked, for example, at the case of Enron. If you remember, they went bankrupt, I think it was 2001 or 2000. And he showed us how all the big investment banks were still recommending people to buy the stock, even almost before the stock was worth zero, and it had already dropped by a lot. And he showed us how, if you actually knew how to look at the numbers, you could have spotted that Enron was not a good stock to buy. So this was really interesting. Something that also was new for me was really being able to look at EBITDA and what actually that means, and operating cash flow and all these things, which of course in the beginning, so I'm self-employed, I'm not running a business in that sense, isn't super important yet, right? Because you don't have all these kind of different cash flows. So for me, it's pretty easy, right? I don't have any kind of financing or any inventory or any things really. I just have the revenue that comes in. I have a few costs that are basically insurance, a couple of tools, and that's it, right? So in my case, or if even if you want to become self-employed, it's a lot simpler than what we learned yesterday. But I still found it very helpful because if I ever wanted to start investing in companies, that is a super so skill. Or even if one day you decide you want to go from self-employment to actually building a business with employees and whatever, then these numbers are also very important. And now it feels like, I mean, honestly, I always found evaluating companies and looking at balance sheets and like doing this kind of investing, found it intimidating to a certain way. I mean, also because I wasn't super interested in learning about all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, if you don't know what you're doing, it's intimidating. But after yesterday, I definitely feel more confident that, yeah, maybe one day I'll do this kind of investing where you actually really look into single companies. So at the moment, what I'm doing is just really investing into index funds, which doesn't take a lot of work in terms of evaluating single companies, but you're just investing in an index. And that already brings me to the other topic that we discussed yesterday, which is building passive income, building something on the side that doesn't require your effort, your energy as much, but still makes you money, especially over time. So I hope that you have or heard already about the compounding effect of interest. And this is what it is about, right? So the earlier you start investing, even if it's just a little sum, even if it's like just 20 euros, $20, whatever a month, even if you do that from a very early age, that's way better than starting later with a much higher sum because you're missing out on all these compounding investment effects. So we talked about how you allocate your assets and how much of your monthly income you put aside, how much of that income you then put into a safety peace of mind bucket. So that doesn't necessarily just mean having it in the bank, but can also be what is considered safe investments like bonds. And then having a growth or risk bucket where you put money into, for example, indices, real estate, crypto, commodities, gold, silver, these kind of things. So where you then actually where you're taking risk, so you could lose some of the money, but you also have the chance to grow that money without too much of your energy and focus. And that prompted me to reevaluate my plans that I have that go into my index funds, and potentially I also will now start looking into investing into commodities. I mean, also there is index funds for that, so it's not super complicated. I'm not gonna buy single commodities or anything, but yeah, just looking into that asset category is something that I'm taking away from yesterday. And finally, the most fun part. And I think also, I mean, I assume many people have heard about, you take some money on the side, you put something in like safe investments, and then you have a percentage that you put towards index funds and investments that have more risk, but also more potential of return. Um, I think that is kind of common knowledge, at least. But what I also only learned in the last couple of months and what came up yesterday again is also having a dreams bucket. So part of the money that you're putting aside goes into your dreams or fun bucket. And there you put all the kind of stuff that you want to do. And you don't think about if you can afford them right now or not. So you could put stuff like flying on a private jet, even if that is completely out of reach at the moment. You could also, and not just, I mean, so there were basically three categories in terms of time: short term, midterm, long term. What are the things you really want to do? And then also thinking about what are the things you want to do for yourself, for your family, and then for people you don't even know. So also giving a certain percentage of your income to other people. And you can start doing that at any income again, because we're talking about percentages, right? So if you don't have a lot of income and you give 2%, then that's just smaller absolute sum, but you can still do it, right? And as your income grows, these 2% just grow in terms of absolute money, or like 3%, whatever, could be 10. And this was really fun. Also, really thinking about, because also I mean, I come from a very strong scarcity mindset, and all I did was trying not to spend so much money, and I kind of felt bad when I did spend money and then putting everything on the side, and it was kind of hard for me to part with that money. So that also made money not a very fun topic. So now what I've shifted, and also what this dream bucket is about, is you put away money for fun, to enjoy, to make spending money joyful and enjoy that process. And even if you give it away, right, this is a very joyful experience. It gives you a lot of good feelings when you give to others and you see the joy that you can give to them through others. So yeah, we made a list of all the things that we wanted to do, be it for ourselves, our family, for others, also things that you just wanted to buy. And yeah, I also recently started really doing these kind of fun and a little bit crazy experiences with money. Um, because it really shifts your mindset on money, right? I think a lot of mindset, I mean, I talked a lot about handling fear and uncertainty when you go into business or become self-employed, but I think the other part really is a lot of money mindset work. Because I think most of us are trained to have a super strong need for security around money, and we ha we tend to have, we don't necessarily see it as something positive because it can be a limiting factor, right? Especially if you see it like that. So shifting your emotion and your relationship towards money more towards something that um, gives you power, that is empowering, that is fun, that is joy, that is expansion really helps. And this is what those experiences are also for, right? So you basically experience life on a new level, you're experiencing something new, and then that gives you this feeling of, oh, this is what life could be like. I want more of it. And this gives you more drive, more motivation. And you also see what money can do for you. And you shift this negative perception that many of us have around money and around spending money, maybe even. And also, what I like that Tony always says is we always think that money is kind of super scarce, and if we lose it, it's hard. But actually, money is a resource that you can rebuild. And there were like himself, but then also the people that he brings on stage. They often talk about how they lost everything and then rebuild everything and even much more than what they had before. I mean, it's not an easy process and the process is painful, but you grow, you learn, and it's possible. Whereas time or the time that we have on this planet Earth is limited, and that is actually the only resource that we cannot replenish, that we cannot get back. And this is actually the scarcest resource that we have, not money. Yeah, this there were a couple more insights around how the super wealthy manage their money, but I have to admit there were a couple of things said that I haven't fully understood yet, and I still need to go back and see exactly how those work before I can talk about it. So I think this is the recap for today. We're heading over now to the West Palm Beach Convention Center for day 4, and let's see what's in store for today. One last thing. What was actually really fun, um, we did a live auction for a nonprofit organization, Marsa, I think is their name. I also shared on my Instagram that frees young girls from sex trafficking. And that was just such a cool experience because there were people like we raised, I think in total, I mean, Tony gave 250K, and then in total, I think we raised $3.1 million. And it was such a cool experience because there were people who gave $20, there were people who gave 500, there were people who gave 5K, there were people who gave 10K, and there were people who gave 250K. And it doesn't really matter how much you give as long as you give. Just give to the capacity that you can right now. And and then, everyone comes together, everyone does what they can, and then in the end, you end up with more than $3 million in 45 minutes, which is amazing. And yeah, and he always said the secret to living is giving, and there is really truth in that. And also, what he says is if you don't give the dime out of the dollar, you won't give the 100K out of a million or the 100K out of a billion. So I think we often feel like if we can't give a lot, it's not worth it. I mean, I gave like $600 yesterday, which also I don't know, it felt it didn't feel like a lot when you see all these huge sums coming in, like other people giving 10K, 20K. And you feel okay, 600. But yeah, I think just letting go of this judgment, just make giving about giving and not about how much you give. And it's still it still helps others, and it still makes you feel good. So it's not only about how much you can give, even though, of course, if you can give more, that's great. But even if you can just give a little bit, that already makes a difference for you and for others. Okay, that's now really the closing statement for today. And see you tomorrow for a recap of day 4.